right, well, welcome to Impact. If you haven't been here before, we have, a year and a half ago, we started Matthew. And we are, after this week, we're going to close Matthew 8, all right, this week. And then we'll be a third of the way through Matthew. I think, maybe not sermon-wise, but I think chapter-wise, all right? So, but if you haven't been here, don't worry. We try to make sure that each message still kind of fits in and amongst itself. But let's zoom out for a second, and I'll get everybody kind of back on track. So Matthew 8 is like a highlight reel of Jesus' authority. So like over sickness, over nature, and over following him, right? He heals a man with leprosy, someone totally untouchable, right? He touches him, right? And then he touches a woman, which Jewish men that weren't married to them didn't generally do, right? So there's all these things that Jesus can do some things that let us know that he's in charge. And then even after that, he gets into a boat and says, hey, we got to go to the other side of the sea. And then there's a storm, right? And there was a whole storm. And remember, Jesus says, stop it, right? And the storm stops. And then they get to the other side. And that's where we're picking up today. They have arrived at the other side of the region. Other side of the sea. So Matthew 8, if you don't have a Bible and you would like one, there are some Bibles in the back table by the cake. So if you get a cake and a Bible. So it says this, verse 20, it says, when he arrived at the other side of the region, in the region of the Gadarenes. Okay? So they left Capernaum, which is kind of home turf. Okay? They got into the boat, they had the storm. And the region of the Gadarenes, it wasn't just across the sea, it was across every boundary that the Jews found good, right? It was unclean, it was uncomfortable, and they were unwanted in this area. But this is where they've gone. It's like Jesus seems to always go into the areas that no one wants to go. And so the church is the body of Christ. Like, that's what we've been saying. And so if Jesus is always moving into uncomfortable places, right, the church should also be moving into uncomfortable places. Like, Jesus didn't avoid these places. He actually aimed at these places. And if we're going to be the body of Christ, then we can't stay where it's safe all the time. We can't always be preaching to the people that agree with us and serving the people that like us. And those things. So we need to be going into these places. And so whether it's addiction recovery centers, marginalized neighborhoods, or even maybe hostile online spaces, right? These are our Gadarenes. And our job is not to fear the darkness, but our job is to carry the light into those spaces. Because the moment Jesus steps on shore, even the demons start to tremble. And so I know I ask this question a lot, but what is it that through the days or weeks moves you to compassion? What is it that breaks your heart? Like when you're going through the week, and that's what we're talking about. So Jesus is going, like, you've got to get into these dark places, but there should be something. When I talk about dark places, like something inside you should go, I know the space that I see that's dark. Like I know the place that I'm called to. I know the place that I could be a benefit to. Right? That's why we're a large group of people, not just one person the same kind. We all stretch so far into this community that we're able to touch it in ways that most people aren't. And so that's what we're called, to go into these places and to shine the light, in the brightest light into the darkest places. So it says the rest of the verse in Matthew 28, says this, says, when he arrived at the other side in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from their tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. So what do we do with that? With demon possession in the 21st century? Because I don't think we can brush it off like a lot of people want to. The writers of the New Testament clearly believed that something was going on. And Jesus clearly believes that something is going on here. And Jesus doesn't like sidestep. It's like, I feel like some of us, like, we want to be like, all right, Jesus is like, I'm going to heal this demon, but really we know it's schizophrenia, right? It's like that, it's like we kind of want Jesus to kind of do that thing, but like Jesus is going, no, there's something going on here. And so Jesus walks into this moment as a real, that it's a real serious moment. And we have modern categories now, right, for trauma, or about trauma, mental health, loss of control. And listen, we talk about it pretty openly here. I think, what was it, like 2 months ago, I almost had a panic attack, and up here just because of medication change, right? And so these are real things that really happen, but that doesn't mean that the spiritual world doesn't exist, okay? It doesn't mean that Jesus was wrong, and if anything, it shows how thin our modern categories are when we're confronted with something that's truly dark. And I think that sometimes we get encapsulated into our little bubbles and forget how much evil is really out there. If you spend enough time on the news, you see it. But he steps onto the shore knowing exactly what's waiting, and he still walks towards it. Jesus doesn't flinch, and we shouldn't. These are the spaces we're called to as a church. So let's go back to our text here. Verse 29 says this, "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" This is a strange verse if you've never read the Bible. Like, what on earth is Jesus, or what on earth are these demons talking about? And so in the Bible, there's an understanding that demons have a better understanding of the spiritual world. Okay, that they kind of know. And James talks about this in his book, James 2, verse 17. He says, this is the brother of Jesus. In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds." Verse 19, "You believe that there is one God." Good. Almost like a good for you is kind of what it wants to be. Even the demons believe that and shudder. And so James is like, there is an understanding that just belief, like, it's not really just about like believing that God exists, right? That's not. It's far more than that. And the demons were aware of Jesus' power, but the disciples that were with him weren't, right? So they're way more aware. Like, literally, Jesus just stopped a storm that threatened to destroy their boat, and the disciples, what they say? They said, "Who is this man? Who is this man that controls the weather?" And then the demons are like, "Oh, we know exactly who he is. We know exactly who he is." And so he says, "Have you come?" Or, "Why have you come at this time?" So I think James drives home the point that belief in and of itself does not make you a Christian. Right? The leper and the centurion, do you remember what they called Jesus? Kyrios, Lord, right? They went to Jesus, the leper and the centurion, when they came to Jesus for healing, right? It was, they didn't, it was, "Hey, Lord." It wasn't like, "I just believe you exist." It was like, "I trust in you," right? It's the difference between I believe in parachutes, right? But I'm not jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, right? Like, that's faith. I don't have faith in parachutes. I believe in them, okay? Like, that's kind of what we're talking about here. And so the leper's faith moved him to break every cultural barrier and approach Jesus. That's real faith. The centurion told Jesus, "You don't have to come to my house. You can just say the words." That's a faith that Jesus has. That's the faith the centurion has, that Jesus has ultimate authority. That's active faith. And so I trust you, and I am willing to pay the consequence for my faith. That's what faith means. It does have a cost, but it has a trust to it. I believe, and I'm believing, and it causes action. Now, the second part of the verse, right? It says this, "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" And so there's basically two ways to kind of understand this. So one argument that I found was, and so like with this, like I said, I've said this a few times about the book of Matthew. I am thoroughly learning along with all of us, right? I mean, this is stuff I've never dove into, and so I'm, a lot of this is new for me. So one of the arguments for the appointed time is like, so because Jesus was going over to the Gadarenes, which was the Gentile area, and on the other side was the Jewish area, some people would say, well, Jesus, are you coming to the Gentiles before your resurrection, right? Because what we'll find is that Paul is going to take, like later on in Acts, if we ever get done with Matthew, maybe we'll go to Acts and find out what happens. But they, Jesus is coming again, or I'm sorry, dang it. I told you some of this is new for me. So the other argument, there are basically two ways to understand this part. Some people would argue that especially because Matthew is writing specifically to Jewish Christians, the ministry to the Gentiles isn't supposed to start until after the resurrection. There we go. That's why the demons are hiding out there. They're like, hey, we want to avoid Jesus at all costs. So let's get away from where he hangs out, right? And then, so there's their argument saying, well, why are you over here? You're not supposed to be here yet, right? We thought we could get away from you. That's one argument. That's not. The other argument, and this is maybe the way I would lean toward, is although technically both could be true, is that the appointed time that the demons are mentioning is the second coming of Jesus, not the first, right? So that Jesus, when he comes back, that's when God conquers and we win and all the demons, right? There's that whole thing, right? That's Revelation, and that's a fun one too, okay? So back to our passage, verse 30. Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. And so you can tell we're in Gentile territory because there's pigs around. You do not find pigs in Jewish territory, all right? So we're in unclean animals, and they didn't like them. They didn't raise them. I don't even know if they talked about them, right? So this herd this is a herd that belongs to some Gentiles in the area. And so in verse 31 it says, the demons begged Jesus. Now the word begged is going to show up twice. And it's Matthew trying to say Jesus has authority. If they have to beg him, right, that means that he has authority. So that they beg him, if you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs. He said to them, go. Now this was pretty cool. This is the only word Jesus says in this story, is go. This is one of those little nuances that I think even my commentaries and some of the stuff I study, like there was like nothing about this, but by a random chance, last week when I was leaving here, I saw a Bible in one of the offices that was a Jewish study Bible, or Jewish New Testament. And I was like, I want to read this, right? So I took it home, and when I was studying, I was like, what's going on with this passage? And in that passage, or in that book that I randomly grabbed, it was the only book that mentioned this word go. And so this is one of those little nuances. But there's what would happen is what Jesus does with one word, go, would have resonated with Jewish audiences, right? There are even stories in rabbinic tradition of respected teachers. His name was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. You'll remember that. There's a test later, right? And so what he would do is there's stories of him casting out demons by only using the word go, right? And so this is something that the Gentiles but only the Jewish people, who Matthew's writing to, specifically to Jewish audience, is going, you guys will never get, like, look what Jesus did. He did what, the rabbi, I'm not going to try to say his name again. He did that. So they're tying this back to, for the Jews, they want you to know that Jesus is still Jewish, right? Because they want to communicate that to them so that they would follow Jesus, all right? And so that's kind of what's happening there. Matthew is having Jesus essentially give a head nod to other Jewish teachers. Okay, so it's kind of connecting that there. So this is what it says. So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And then the whole town went out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. And that's the end of the chapter. Like, it just kind of stops there. And actually, the next verse in 9 has them getting back on the boat and going back. So it's like, I just thought it was interesting that Matthew just kind of leaves us with this, why? Like, Jesus just came into your town, healed somebody that had been making you guys crazy, right? Like the pastor said, they couldn't even go by them. They couldn't go that way, right? And it's like Jesus heals all of this, and then you still say, please leave. And so I wondered, is it an economic issue? Right? It's like, Jesus, who's going to pay for all these pigs? Right? I mean, these are somebody's pigs. This is somebody's herd, probably somebody's livelihood. And if Jesus had only been there for a moment, it's like, and it cost them this much, it's like, how much more are you going to cost us, Jesus, if you stay? And that's a fair question. I think that's the question we're supposed to ask. You have to choose how you will answer it. Following Jesus has its costs. But it's not because he's reckless. It's because he rearranges priorities. Right? It profits. If profit comes before people, Jesus will flip that. And if comfort comes before calling, Jesus will challenge that too. And so like maybe it was economic, but then also I think it was probably a heart issue. What Jesus did was wild and undeniable. The whole town came out to see if this was real, right? It's like, okay, we heard a story. We have to see this for ourselves. And they saw him, and it says they begged him to leave. There's no mild reaction to that. Just like Jesus, it's like you either have to decide, like, Jesus, please leave, or it's like, please leave is a perfectly reasonable response to the power of Jesus. It's completely reasonable. Because the only other response is what we saw in the beginning of Matthew 8. Matthew 8, 1 and 2. When Jesus came down from the mountains, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord. So it's either please leave, or it's to kneel and call him Lord. Those are our only two options. C.S. Lewis, I think he said it best, Christianity, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. That's exactly what happens here. Jesus shows up, and the people are forced to choose, and they do. They ask him to leave. Because Jesus had already disrupted their world, and they weren't ready to see what else he might rearrange in their lives. And that's the truth about Jesus. He will not be moderately important in your life. He will either be king, or you'll keep asking him to leave. The only question is, what do you want more, control or freedom? So when we look at chapter 8, having closed it, Matthew wants his readers to know that Jesus has authority. He has authority over disease, like the leper, authority over space when he heals the servant without being there, his authority over sickness, like Peter's mother-in-law, authority over nature in the storm, and authority over the spiritual world here. But there's a strange and haunting pattern in Matthew 8, if you haven't picked up on it. The ones you'd expect to have great faith, the disciples, the insiders, the religiously clean, they hesitate, they panic, they barely pass. But the ones on the outside, the leper, the centurion, they come with bold, raw faith, and Jesus praises them. But then you reach the Gadarenes, two men tormented, broken, chained up by society and by evil. They don't worship, they don't trust, they don't even ask for healing. They just scream at Jesus, "What do you want with us, Son of God?" And they're not wrong. He is the Son of God, but as James says, even the demons believe and shudder. So recognition is not the same as surrender. The demons knew who he was. They just didn't want him near. And so the question we have to ask is, do you want Jesus near you? He's not moderate, he's not manageable, he's not convenient, but he is good. So the question isn't just, do you believe? The real question is, will you kneel like the leper, trust like the centurion, or send him away like the townspeople? God bless you, church.